Codependency really is with two people.
Right.
Dependency is maybe when an individual or something is dependent on something else. So I will give the example of myself.
Mhm.
I was very dependent on food for emotional stability when
Yeah.
I had an eating disorder because I didn't know how to receive any type of love or acceptance from another person, but I knew food could give it to me.
It was a constant for you.
Yes, but then it was an endless cycle of I felt horribly after eating it.
Right.
So I needed to purge to release it.
Right.
So am I correct in kind of assuming that codependency is, with another, and then dependency, it's almost your relation to something else, right?
Correct.
I give the example of food, but it could be, money, it could be shopping, it could be your job, the title of something really profound that you identify yourself with. And then also that's how your personality is created and adapted through.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, yeah, and like the food example is great because with a eating disorder, it's almost like a routine and rhythm, right? Like you know that food is always going to be there. You know that that's always going to it's always going to be available for you. You know that that's going to bring you comfort, even though you know at the end when you finish essentially binging, and then you have that awful, crappy feeling of like, now I need to get rid of all of this because what the hell did I just do to myself? And then you purge. That is literally this behavior that's bringing you that comfort that I mean, eating disorders are extremely complex, but that's just a good example of how that can bring you so much basically wrong stability. Like
Yes.
you feel like you're so stable within that, but it's so incredibly toxic and destroying your body and destroying your life. But in that moment when you're craving something that you can depend on, you're craving that behavior, which is the
Yes.
binging and the purging. I mean, eating disorders, gosh, I mean, they're incredibly complex and difficult to dive into, but that is an excellent example. And I think when we often think of codependency and we think of dependency, we often go towards like relationships.
Yes.
You brought up a really good point that it's not always about a relationship with somebody else, right? Like it can be
Mhm.
something else. It can be on random objects. It can't, like you brought up work. Like think about all the people that you probably know that have such an unhealthy relationship with work.
Mhm.
Yes.
So they're putting all of their eggs into that work basket and they're neglecting other parts of their life. And we often think of like the different parts of ourselves that we are like nurturing and that we feel really confident in. And sometimes people feel that confidence within their work life but not in other parts of their life, so then they're giving
Mm.
so much to work. And I'm going to give some self disclosure here. I previously have had a really unhealthy relationship with work. I was in extremely toxic work environments and I was almost thriving off of the toxicity of it.
Mhm.
Mm.
And I would tell myself, well, I'm just going to stay because I'm good at it, or I'm going to stay because I'm getting it done. Little did I know that pieces of me, I was almost like pieces of me were just completely being destroyed. And I was neglecting my personal life. I was neglecting my relationship. I was neglecting my health. I was just so focused on work. And I had somebody tell me something, a coworker that I used to work with. She was actually a supervisor, but then she turned into a coworker. And she said, you know, Meg, if you die tomorrow, they will replace you the next day.
Oh, I just got chills.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I had to
Mm.
sit with that and really realize I'm giving so much of myself to this place that will replace me in an instant. Maybe they'll grieve me for, a little bit and they'll say, wow, like she was good, but like still have to get the job done. So we're going to have to find somebody else to get the job done. And I had to really sit and process that. Then I left that toxic job, went to another toxic job. And every time I found myself getting into that space of where I was giving all of me, literally all of me, everything I had, to the point of where at the end of the day, I would come home and I was just mush. My brain
Yeah.
was so fried, there was nothing left. I had to literally tell myself, if you die tomorrow, they will replace you the next day.
Isn't it so
So
interesting how the pattern keeps repeating itself?
exactly.
It,
Yes.
that's,
Yeah.
yeah, we talk about on the show all the time patterns, life patterns. These are subconscious patterns that are in our brain that we just developed from childhood. But what people, I believe, and I would love your opinion on it, is that they don't realize it. So they jump from relationship to relationship, job to job that's toxic. And then they're like, oh my gosh, how is this happening? It's
I
like,
have the worst luck.
yeah,
Yeah. Well,
it's like,
because we crave consistency.
yes,
Mhm.
and
We
it's
crave
familiar. It's
familiarity. We crave
familiar.
familiarity. Yes. So we engage in the same exact patterns of behavior. And then people are like, well, why does this keep happening to me? Why am I in this bad situation? Why do I keep having these horrible relationships? Because you're putting yourself in that situation. You don't even realize you are. And a lot of times that's why you see, especially patterns in abusive relationships.
Mhm.
People will say, well, I was in multiple abusive relationships. And sometimes we sit back as somebody that's possibly in a healthy relationship and go, holy crap, I've been in a healthy relationship for years. How has this person been in like 5 abusive relationships? And it's because we oftentimes go after the same type of people because we crave that familiarity, even though we know or may not know yet how toxic and horrible it is for us. So,
Yeah.
what, yeah, I mean, we just, as humans, we just repeat the same patterns of behavior and we hate change, right?
Oh,
Mhm.
exactly.
We
Yeah.
don't like change. We don't like things to feel different. We like to stay within the same routine and rhythm. And when our routine is off, when things feel different, we feel weird and we try to avoid that weird feeling. So then we stay in situations that don't even feel good.
Mhm. Yeah,
Absolutely.
just because it's familiar.
Right.
Yeah.
So I
Right.
always think like the ego like perceives anything that's new and out of the ordinary as a threat to its
Right.
existence. So
Exactly. Yeah.
you'd rather be miserable and familiar than the unknown, even though the potential is to be happy.
And I think a big part of this too, and why we talk about it so much, is these patterns that are continuous. We very much are addicted to, suffering familiar feelings, even as bad as they are. But this is what really gets me excited, and perhaps something that I dove deep within myself. Like I realize this is what Dan and I talk about: changing jobs, changing relationships with different people. Those are outside of you. Just be you gave a great example, Meg. You went from one toxic work environment to the other, probably not thinking that it was you that needed to work on subconscious patterns within ourselves. Nothing's going to change outside unless we look within us to understand those root causes. And typically those root causes start at such a young age we're unaware of them. That's the pattern. That's how they stay alive.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I
And there's
mean,
nothing, I want to make the listeners understand, like, there's nothing wrong with you for doing these things.
no.
This is life beautifully presenting you the opportunity to change.
Right. And I mean, no, yeah, and exactly. We're not doing anything wrong.
Mhm.
No.
And there's people that live their entire lives in these same patterns, but have no idea that they were living in this pattern that wasn't benefiting them. They weren't living the happiest or most full life that they could. I mean, let's be honest. Is anybody living the most full life that they possibly can?
The
Yeah,
great
probably not.
question.
Yeah.
I mean, I can sit here right now and say no. Like for
Yeah, of
myself,
course.
you guys can probably say the same. Like we are always able to grow. And that's what's beautiful about just being a person and just mental health in general is that you are able to grow in so many different capacities. And we are able to change and evolve. But we have to put that work in ourselves. Because if we live our
Mhm.
life in this kind of stagnant phase, thinking that things are just going to happen for us, like, hey, you might be a lucky person where like really good things have happened for you and you didn't really try. It happens. Great, good for you. For the most of us, and probably, I mean, not for me, probably
Yeah.
not for you guys. Like, if you want change to happen or you want things to feel better, you have to put the work in or you have to figure out what is going to make you feel better. That's the hard part. That's where it
Mhm.
gets really difficult because I know that it's really easy just to sit with your discomfort.
Yep.
Yep.
It's so easy to sit with your discomfort. And if it wasn't, then every single person on the planet would be in therapy. Literally.
Yes.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
But it's much easier just to be like, well, I'm just gonna deal with this. Like, I know that there's a problem. I know I'm not happy. I know I'm not where I should be or where I want to be, but I don't really feel like putting that effort in. Okay, so
Mhm.
where's that coming from? Is that just pure laziness? Is this something that's maybe a little bit more clinical? Like maybe it is a little bit more clinical, or maybe it's just you don't want any change. You don't feel comfortable with
Yeah.
change. And
Yeah.
that in and of itself can leave you just kind of sitting in the same boat for your entire life. And I kind of think of, older generations, like our grandparents' generations and even older than that, like look at their lives.
Yeah.
Just sit
Mhm.
back and look at and maybe you have had, grandparents that have had these wild, amazing, adventurous lives or really have lived their lives. But I know I've talked to a lot of people and can even speak from personal experience of just, you kind of were just given this hand and that's kind of the life you led and you didn't really do much else.
Mhm.
And then life, that's it.
Yeah. There's no questioning of it, or like
No, there's a
questioning of your place in the world.
Exactly, like, that's just this is my life. This is how
Yeah.
it's supposed to be. Like, I was supposed to get married young, I was supposed to have children, I was not supposed to have a career, supposed to take care of the house. Now I'm old, and now I just kinda hang out, and that's it.
Yeah. I feel like in a lot of ways, like we're at a level of like human evolution
For
where
sure.
we're getting to the point where, for the most part, a lot of our needs are met, and we don't need to struggle to survive. Obviously, like not like life is really hard for some people, but
Yeah,
we don't need to struggle in the same way that generations before us did.
right.
So now it's like we have the opportunity and the safety to spend more time being introspective and looking inside
Mm.
and like evolving and raising our consciousness and like
Right. But how
doing new
horrifying and
things.
terrifying is it to take risks?
Oh shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, literally, like, that to it's so terrifying to take a leap, to make a change, to do something different in your life.
Hmm.
So and you're right, like, we are at a very different place now, and what God, I still can't even believe it's 2024.
Right.
Like, we're in year 2024. This is a very different time period than, like, the 1930s, 1940s, like,
Yeah.
simpler times back then, and then that's just kind of how it was, and now here we are, where in many cases, we can take a leap, we can take a risk, we can make a huge life change, and maybe it won't be life altering if we fail, but the idea of failure is what is potentially is holding a lot of people back.
Hmm.
Absolutely. I'm really glad that you brought that up kind of to tie in the familial, generational codependency that I witnessed, because this is interesting because it is something that Dan and I constantly talk about, coming from and I know that you can relate and probably Dan can too, like in very old nostalgic Italian background where our grandmothers were the matriarchs of the family that did everything for their husbands and their children. Say, my grandmother did work, but family is first. And she modeled that by doing everything for everybody and then received love that way.
Mhm.
She would feed everybody first. She'd be the last one sitting at the table and then she'd feed herself.
Right.
And if anybody ever brought like a partner, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife over to the dinner table, the women always had to serve the men, like this very patriarchal thing. But I don't want to get into patriarchy, but
Yeah.
codependence. But
Yeah.
that's very Italian. It's like being taken care of others is
Yes.
how you receive love. So that is kind of was modeled to me. So
Mhm.
when Dan and I first started dating, I always cooked. I always cleaned. I felt I wanted to take care of him in ways. Financially, I took care of us for a long time. It was all of these things that boosted my, I guess, self-worth.
Yes.
But in turn, what I was looking for was love in a very specific way that Dan was not giving to me
Mhm.
because he was not emotionally available to give it to me.
Mhm.
And also as a child, I my emotional needs were not met. So it was this perfect storm of
Mhm.
me trying so desperately to get Dan to love me and taking care of him in all these different ways. And then when we started the business 4 or 5 years ago, I was like, Dan, I'll handle all the emails. I'll handle all the sales. I'll handle this. I'll handle this. I'll handle it. And not that he didn't appreciate it, but he wasn't giving me the love that I required to fill this part of me that needed something on a deeper level. So then I subconsciously was saying in my mind, I was telling myself a story that I was never worthy of love because I wasn't receiving it. So what
Mhm.
did I do? I just continued the cycle of do more, rescue more, do more. And it became this, but then I say codependent because he was benefiting from it because he was
Yeah,
reaping the benefits.
yeah.
Again, not in a bad way. We're just using our relationship as an example.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's so common, and especially for women, to feel that they are going to gain what they want from their partner by giving and doing, especially when it comes to housework and taking care of things and managing everything and just, but then you're also realizing that that's how you are getting a sense of control. So much of
Yes.
you
Mhm.
feels out of control that that's where you are taking control. So instead of you saying, okay, I'm doing everything. I'm cleaning, I'm cooking, I'm managing the business, I'm doing everything. Dan is getting all of the reward. He's getting everything. He can just sit on his butt and do nothing. And he's, living large over here. Then you start to resent him.
Yes.
Instead of relinquishing control and saying, I'm going to give you this job, or hey, Dan, why don't you clean this week? Or hey, why don't you cook dinner tonight? Because knowing Dan, he'd probably be like, okay, like, sure. Like, but the thing is,
Mhm.
he probably just needs you to, he probably in that time needed you to tell him what you
Mhm.
needed. And instead of you telling him what you needed, you just did, driving yourself into a hole of like, this is how you were holding on to all of that control that you needed at that time.
100%.
Incredibly common
Mhm.
that will, and this isn't even just women in the relationship. It can be anybody in a partnership. One person sometimes will take control, and it's almost where you probably got a sense of pride with a lot of what you were doing because you felt like I'm a badass, like I'm taking care of everything, I can do everything, but you probably felt like shit at the same time.
Hmm. Yeah. I was
So it's
depleting
like,
myself.
Mhm.
I'm
Yeah.
great. I'm doing all this. Look at me. Anybody, he's lucky as hell to be with me. But then you're like, I'm so freaking tired and I
Yes.
just wanted to do something.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's all about power and control is exactly what I was hearing. And I think a lot of times, especially with, the generational stuff, especially when our Italian families I'm wondering how many listeners grew up with kind of in similar backgrounds, but that is where a lot of women that's pride. They are excited to be able to serve the family, give them their food, taste my food. I want to take care of you. And a lot of times those women are not working. That's
Mhm.
not. Let me not say that they are not getting paid work.
Yeah, sure.
They are working for the family. So that is where they are so prideful. That is where they want to be able to show that is love. And then we see that. And then, especially now in our generation, it's like work, 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 work. So we're doing all of that our older generations were doing on top of working for money. And then we're just exhausted. What's left of us at the end of the day? You were probably mush. Your brain
Yeah.
was mashed
Mhm.
potatoes. You had nothing left to give. And then that's when the resentment kicks in. And then that's where he has no idea what the hell is going on. He probably thinks you're just in a shit mood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty accurate. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, it is like I think these are all like because it's subconscious. Like, I think even Elise at the time didn't know she was doing it. It was just sort of like playing out, like not to put words in your mouth, but like you didn't realize that like the more I do, the more love I
Yeah.
might receive.
Yeah, because no one verbalizes that either. Like as a child, I was my grandmother didn't sit me down and say, "This is how you're going to get love." No, as a child, what is it? Right out of the womb to 7 years, you're just a sponge. You're just absorbing. All I did was observe. No one ever spoke these words to me. I just observed the actions of others, mimicked them to think like, all right, this is how I'm going to get love. This is how I'm going to survive. This is how I'm part of a unit.
Mm-hmm.
And exactly like you said, it, once we began this kind of wellness and healing journey and understanding that these are subconscious patterns within me, that's how I realized like, oh, okay, it's normal, like you said, because it's so common with other people, but I don't want to live this way anymore.
Right.
It's like because I feel I lost a big chunk of who I actually am. But at the same time, I'm also going through an identity crisis then here, because then it's like, oh shit, who am I if I'm not rescuing Dan, doing things for him? And then who is he in the relationship? Is he going to realize that, oh, he never needed me all along and leave me? Like, that's the control aspect that you were talking about.
Yes. Yes. And then your mind just starts jumping to all different types of conclusions. And then your brain spins, and then, the anxiety's kicking in, and the fears, and, the fear-based thinking, and then you're catastrophizing, and then, blah, 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 like we talked about last time,
Yeah.
Yeah.
how our brain just spins, and it's like this vicious, it's like I've called it internal chaos. It's literally like you feel like your insides are just like going crazy. So, it's also, we as humans, we crave attention. And it's not always like a negative. Like we often hear about like there are, negative attention seeking, especially like within the clinical world. There's a lot of situations where we'll talk about like attention seeking behavior, but just in general, humans just, they want to get it. They want to be acknowledged. And for you, you just simply wanted acknowledgement. You simply wanted to feel like what you were doing was being seen, like what you were doing was being valued. And when we don't feel like what we are doing is being valued, we then overcompensate. So you continue to do until you feel like you're getting something in return. So this is, when we were talking earlier about work, like this is where a lot of people have really toxic relationships with work, because they're doing and doing and doing, and they want to get recognition from their boss. They want to get recognition from the people that they're working with. They want to be seen as competent. You're not getting that recognition. Okay, so let me do more. Let me volunteer to do more. Then you're known as a person that will just do.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And not like you're getting extra compensation for it. So like even when you were doing all this extra stuff at home, you weren't getting extra compensation for it. You were just doing because you were trying to get some type of damn acknowledgement that you were worth something.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that's obviously, yes, stemming from a lot of behaviors that you saw when you were a kid, kind of seeing how people around in your family were interacting with each other. A lot of people just kept doing and doing and doing and doing. And then maybe some days they'd get a pat on the back for being great. And then some days they'd get jack shit. So,
Yes.
and then
Yeah.
you just, those days you get jack shit, you just keep on doing. And then
Yeah.
you feel terrible.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we're using the example with Dan, but I do this with pretty much everybody in my life. I am a yes person, a people pleaser, obviously
Yeah.
recovering from all of these things.
You're a recovering
Because,
yes person.
yeah, exactly. But honestly, like it just dawned on me one day that I didn't want to feel this way any longer.
Yeah.
And through our learnings and discoveries of, kind of spiritually awaking, becoming, more empowered, understanding that, okay, wait a minute. If everybody that I'm listening to that I respect, teachers, mentors, anybody is telling me that everything that is outside of me is just a reflection of what's going on internally. If Dan's not giving me what I need, I have to give myself what I need.
Right.
And that is where the power lies. That was really oh, whoa.
Mm-hmm.
I have neglected myself, and I haven't given myself the love and the praise that I was looking for someone else.
Yeah.
It was this huge light bulb moment and paradigm shift. And I think once I told Dan that, it also made us closer and better communicators, more understanding. And it was like, wow, yeah, we can take now different roles in this relationship, which is again, it's giving power back to the people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Instead of like leaving it up to Dan, like, oh, okay, I want this from you, I want this from you, I want this from you. No, I can't wait for the day that I say to myself, I don't need that from Dan because I can fill it up for myself. I can give myself what I need. I'm still working on that, but I'm
Sure.
so much more aware of it.
I think there's often, I mean, people often want to, we crave relationships, right? We crave
Mhm.
having a companion. We crave wanting to share life with somebody else, and are sometimes are trying to get something out of those relationships versus
Yes.
like exactly like what you said, realizing that we can get that internally.
Mhm.
Yeah,
That
it's
doesn't
just
require the
unmet
work.
needs.
It's just unmet needs, correct. And then that's where we end up having sometimes really unhealthy relationships because we are seeking something from another person that it's not that person's job or responsibility to give that to you. Relationships should be benefiting each other. It should be adding on to your life, but it shouldn't be the sole purpose of your life. You have to be able to find that own purpose for yourself, and you can't expect that from somebody else. And that's also a really, really, really heavy thing to put on your partner that we often
Yeah.
find in relationships.
Mhm.
Like, am, I need you for happiness. I need you for me to feel fulfilled. I need you for anything. That's a lot of pressure to put on another person. And then that person feels the pressure. And it's, I mean, if we look at just patterns of behaviors and relationships that fail, it's often sometimes related to that because we are seeking so much from that other person. But what are you trying to get from within yourself? And what are you giving? People can't just give, 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 give to make your life what you want it to be. What are you missing? And that's a lot of stuff that's worked on in couples work is realizing that like you're two individuals. You then have a partnership, but you're also two individuals. You're not one person. You guys have been together for a very long time. So it almost feels like you are the same. I
Mhm.
too have been with my husband now for 16 years. It sometimes feels like we are the same person. But then
Hmm.
I have to sit back and realize like, okay, I am expecting too much. I am feeling a type of way right now, an emotion that does not feel good. I'm sitting with it. What am I missing? Is this something? And it's usually something that's deep within yourself and not related to the other person.
Mhm.
And this is where like relationships are so beautiful because you can grow together and you have that mutual partnership. But we have to be extremely mindful that you are two separate people first,
Yeah.
always first. And that's, if you neglect that, I mean, how's your relationship going to thrive if you forget who you are?
Wow, you
Yeah.
said
That's a
that
great question.
beautifully. Were you
Yeah.
say something? Oh,
Yeah. Well, I was just gonna say, I think that a few things. Anytime that we're using our relationship to try to get something from the other person, that's manipulation. It's not a relationship.
Yeah. I
But
mean,
also, like, yeah, so pretty much, like, it's such a common. Most relationships are manipulative, and
hmm
if you look at it in that sense.
hmm
But I also think just like along the line of patterns, I think that anytime we feel like we're lacking something and that we need to go like seek it outside of us, we're never going to. There's nothing outside of us that can fulfill us. So whether we're putting that responsibility on like another person or a job or a title
food.
or yeah, food, just validation and love, like all those things can't really be given to us. And then even when we get them, it's not going to fill the lack. It's just going to reinforce the pattern, and we kind of keep repeating that cycle
hmm
over and over again.
hmm Yeah. And I think we can get so deep in the cycle, and it's like you said, it's like a never ending. And I love that you brought up manipulation as well. I think that's something we don't realize enough that we're doing within our
Mhm.
relationships. And that's not just within our romantic relationships. I mean, think it just about like your family relationships. I mean, just anybody listening, just think back to your it's such an interesting kind of activity just to kind of sit back and reflect on your childhood, and just kind of reflecting on communication patterns within like family, or just things that you've witnessed, and just realizing how much manipulation you have witnessed, or how much you've actually experienced yourself, and just how incredibly toxic that is. And again, like we're having such a really cool conversation just about relationships in general. I mean, romantic relationships as well, but um manipulation, it's a very big piece of some diagnoses that we call personality disorders, and it's something that
Mm.
we could always dive into that, which is incredibly complex and wild to talk about. But manipulation is such a toxic strategy that people use. It's such a It is one of the most painful things to experience by somebody, especially somebody that you love, is just feeling like you're constantly being manipulated, and then you are then acting in ways that you don't want to act because you are just trying to essentially escape the manipulation. Um, and we oftentimes don't even know we're doing it. And I will tell you right now, probably 90% of people don't even know that they're being manipulated, or have had relationships their entire life and have no idea that they have been based off of manipulation. You have done so much for somebody else, or you have engaged in certain behaviors just because you want to appease them, or you want to keep the peace, or
Mm-hmm.
somebody will make you feel bad for something, or somebody will essentially make you feel like you are not good enough because you're not doing something for them, when you
Mm-hmm.
in fact are just trying to set healthy boundaries and live your life.
Yes.
And I think we this could be a kind of a cool segue in talking about boundaries within relationships.
Please. Yeah.
Um, but I would love to hear, I mean, I would love to get your take too, as far as what do you all consider to be, I mean, especially within, because you guys I love being able to collaborate with you guys and talk to you guys, because you come from a very different background. You guys are
Mm.
very spiritual, and you guys have this really cool, like, kind of whole health and wellness approach. I'm obviously coming from a more clinical sense,
Mm.
and I love learning from you guys, just hearing about how you perceive relationships and those dynamics. But tell me what you guys feel are, and this is a very broad question, so this could kind of go in a couple different directions, but what do you feel would be like healthy boundaries within a relationship?
Hmm. Something I'm working on for sure.
Aren't we all?
Yeah. Yeah. I've been really leaning into boundaries more because, as we talked about just a few minutes ago, I'm typically a people pleaser and someone who says yes a lot.
Mhm.
And I didn't feel I was worthy to set boundaries for myself because I was afraid that people would either like me or shut me out or abandon me. Those were my wounds. But what I realized is when I say yes to things that I don't actually want to do, it's slowly killing that part of me that so desperately wants to be independent. So boundaries for me now are very much different, that I will not wash the dishes when Dan's done with breakfast, and I will tell him to put things away. I will also, Dan's pretty good at asking me if I want to do something or not. He respects me when I say no. It's a conversation, where I've observed in my other relationships, friends, familial, even coworkers, when I worked at a corporate job, if I were to say no to something, I was immediately met with silence or disappointment. So I've had to work very diligently on how I can say no to people without over explaining myself either. Because that was also something that I felt that I needed to do, the over explanation of things. So, well, I'm trying to build better boundaries, especially within my family and friends. I have to, say I get a text message from a friend of mine that wants to hang out over the weekend, and it's not something that I want to do. I really try to sit with how it makes me feel. If
Mm.
it's a hell yes, I'll say yes. But if it's a hell no, then I'll set the boundary of no. I don't. I'll just say no. This weekend doesn't work.
And let me ask, do you still feel that you're over explaining when you do say no to somebody?
Depends on the person. It depends on the person. No with Dan, other with family and some certain friends. It's almost like I think this is the universe providing me with opportunities to get better at boundary setting with certain people, so that the other people that I haven't been able to fully, not over explain myself, that I'm dipping my toe in to see how they respond. Because I also want to understand, like, if they're not respecting my boundaries, then it is going, I've got to also build up the courage to stop that. There was an instant about a month ago that I had to set a big boundary with my mother. She asked me to do something for her, and typically I am a yes person, and I said no. And Meg, it was not pleasant. I don't want to get too much into it on the show
Sure, of
because it is private, but
course.
it took at least 2 days for me and her to recover from that.
Mm.
So I it's really me trying to step into my power and worthiness, that I am worthy to say no to things that I don't want to do.
How did you feel when those 2 days were up?
Whew. I did a lot of journaling and meditation, but I felt so good because I got through it. It was
Mhm.
like, all right. It was almost like
You
life
got through the
lesson
internal
handed to.
chaos.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes, a lot of internal chaos, but I was okay. I survived it. I was safe. My fears, worries, anxiety, all of those emotions that arose within those couple days, I was able to work through. And now I feel if another opportunity presents itself for me to set another boundary, I'm better equipped to handle it.
Absolutely. You did it
So,
once and you can do it again.
yeah,
And it, like you said, it took 2 days to get through it, and it was probably a big shock when you said no for the other person,
yeah,
Mhm.
and it was also probably a big shock when the words "no" came out of your mouth as being a chronic people pleaser and a yes person since you were little Elise.
yeah. And isn't that this is what the codependency relationship is, right? The people that I'm explaining, my family, friends, certain coworkers at the time, they were dependent on me saying yes.
Yep. So
But
how much
now
of
I'm
a
not
damn
that.
shock was that when you're like, "No," or "I don't want to." It's so uncomfortable, guys, to
Yeah,
Mhm.
say to anybody, "No, I don't want to."
yeah,
I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know a lot of people that just say, "No, like, I'm good," or "No, like, I don't wanna go." Like, I'll say that to my husband, but it's
yes,
really hard to tell other people, like, if you get a
Yeah.
text, "You wanna do this?" And you're like, "No, I don't wanna do this. Like, I don't wanna do that at all." And
yeah.
then you'd be like, "No, like, I can't because."
Mhm.
So what is holding us back from just saying, "No, I don't want to," or "No, I can't"? Why do we feel that we have to give an explanation when we are choosing to make a decision for ourselves, even if it's something super small, like just not wanting to go out to dinner? Maybe you just don't want to go.
Mhm.
Because typically it's just because you don't want to go. But then we feel like okay, or maybe you're even talking to Dan, oh, I just got this text from this person and they want to go out to dinner Saturday. I just don't want to go. It's not like you don't like the person. It's not like you don't love the
Yeah,
person. It's not like you don't want to see them, but you just like, you don't want to, you want to stay home.
Mhm.
yeah,
But it's so uncomfortable just to say like, no, I don't want to,
yeah,
because you're fearful and you're anxious of what the response is going to be. How are they going to perceive me? What are they going to think of me? Are they going to be mad at me? Are they going to think that I'm a jerk because I don't want to go? Where we
Yes.
have so much work as just like a society just to be able to feel comfortable just owning up to things that we just don't want to do without feeling like we need to over explain. And I get
Mhm.
it. I've been a chronic over explainer my whole life too. And oftentimes people with experience with anxiety, we over explain and we're so fearful of disappointing other
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
But how empowering is it when you get to the point of being able to just say no?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's I see.
It's weird
I'm
as
getting
hell.
it.
It is. Yeah. It's such a like release
Yeah.
of
It's
relief.
like I'm tasting it here and there. Even, some work stuff with Dan. I'll tell him I do believe I'm delegating more
Yeah.
and saying
Mm.
I cannot do this. I do not want to do this. You handle it. Where before I was trying to take everything away from him
Yeah.
to,
You're
I don't know,
relinquishing
right?
a little
Yeah.
bit
I
of
agree.
control.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's funny because this kind of actually to kind of come full circle to what you said at the beginning. And I'll make my point. But as a yes person, someone who is a rescuer who's constantly doing things for others, that's also how I identified myself and how I created my reality through this. So I was almost dependent on this label,
Yep.
and which is a form of manipulation. Really, like I didn't even realize I was doing it until again a couple years ago when just introspectively looking at it. But I think I've really had and will continue to have different identity crises because these parts of me are no longer serving me. And I can feel that very much. But the patterns keep arising and showing me where I need to change and do things differently and either let go of aspects of myself that really is harming me, even though it's benefiting other people. That's what it, kind of comes down to. And I think identity is so closely related to how we view ourselves as worthy, kind of is would you agree in that sense? And the reason why I said that because at the beginning you were talking about your job and being in a toxic work environment, then you left and went to another toxic work environment. It's I feel so many people can identify themselves with their job because that's almost it's an identifier. We were watching a show last night, and it blew my mind, and I think you'll think it's really fascinating. Have you ever heard of the show Billions on Showtime?
I have, but I haven't seen it.
Okay, so this isn't giving anything away, but
Good show.
it's a
I have heard.
fascinating
I have
show.
heard.
Yeah, and there's a woman in
Pocket
it.
that
Her
away.
name, yeah. The actor's name is Maggie Siff. She's also on like Sons of Anarchy and stuff. But
Yes. Oh, I love her. Mhm.
oh yes, and she's a therapist in the show. And yes, so you remind me of her so much, doesn't it? But the writing for her specific character on this show is phenomenal. Like it's so much in alignment with Dan and I's views on how to tap into people's potential. It's like this is where it gets me really excited that I think the human race is raising their consciousness. We're expanding our perspectives on how to help people in different areas.
Yeah.
But anyways, we're halfway through the season, and oh, it's gonna give it away when you decide to watch the show, but it's still pivotal. She got herself into a little pickle where she's now under the medical review board to have her license stripped. And she's sitting with her husband, like pleading with him to help her because he's like an attorney and a high up there. And she says to him, I don't know who I am without being a doctor. And it's like, oh shit, that's so interesting because you cultivate your personality through your job and you identify with that. Now I'm using job, same thing. I used people pleaser as this identity, but now that it's not there, I'm like, who the F am I? Like, I
Right.
don't know.
Right.
And I would love to actually get your opinion too, Meg, because you just became a mom.
Yeah.
Like, that's a huge identity crisis, identity shift. And now you're almost have to be dependent on something different that you had never been dependent on before. You're almost creating something new to live through and by.
Yep.
Wait,
So
wait, real quick before you get into that, because I feel like we could go deep into that. And I have like one more kind of example that goes back to our conversation
mhm,
about identity and
mhm,
sort of like the stories we tell ourselves. Is when Elise was talking earlier about how he used to do everything and like, she'd cook and clean and wash the dishes. And you were saying like that's all power and control. And you brought up the example of Elise could have turned to me and be like, how about why don't you make dinner tonight? Why don't you wash the dishes?
mhm.
But she was so wrapped up in the identity of I'm the one who does everything.
Yes.
And it'd be like, if I had done the dishes and made dinner and cleaned and she didn't do anything, who would she be if she didn't have that story and that like thing to hold over me in a sense?
Right.
So it is interesting because it's like not necessarily like a title, but it's still an identity to a story and a pattern.
Yeah, it's
Um,
all relational, kind of like we're talking about. It's relate not necessarily with people, but it's the relationship we have to the labels we place on ourselves, the
Right.
jobs, the descriptions, things like that.
or the
That's
ways
our
we
worth.
believe will be validated.
That's what we hold our worth in.
Mhm.
Even though you knew, or it took you a while to find out that what you were doing was not healthy for you, you still were finding worth in all of those tasks that you were putting on yourself. Because what were you going to do? Go sit on the couch? Because then you probably would have said, "Oh my God, I'm so lazy. I need to go do
Mhm.
something. I need to stay busy." Because you find your worth in keeping busy, doing tasks, getting shit done. That's how you feel accomplished. So to feel comfortable sitting back, giving yourself a minute to breathe and giving somebody else a job, that's really uncomfortable to sit in. And that's why so many of us that just kind of do, and we often find that especially people with anxiety are doers because sitting and being, it's very uncomfortable to just sit and relax or to sit and, oh my God, I'm just going to do nothing right now. I'm just going to watch
Mhm.
TV. I'm going to go have Dan cook dinner and I'm going to chill. But then what should I be doing instead? There's probably laundry to do. There's probably this to do. I should probably go back and forth. Like your brain just starts
Mhm.
spinning because it's so uncomfortable to sit with that because you were holding so much of your worth in that. So for you right now, like you said, you're giving Dan more, you're giving him more, even stuff with work, you know, you are relinquishing pieces of you, which then makes you also feel raw in a sense because parts of you are kind of you're giving that power and control, not fully, but you're giving away some of it. And I
Yeah.
want you to, I'm going to challenge you to think or to kind of realize when you're doing that, when you're giving away things for him to do, are you filling those things with, are you filling that space with other things?
Mhm.
Or are you legitimately giving the power and control away?
Mm.
Because you may find that you're not actually giving away all full power and control. You are giving him more, which is making you guys be more, attuned, more connected, feeling more like I think a lot potentially, even if you don't even know there's resentment, maybe some resentment is going to drift away a little bit. But are you actually for yourself leaving that space?
Mm.
Or are you putting other things in those boxes?
I'm so glad that you said that. Yeah, it's something that I will pay more attention to and observe because I guarantee you, Dan might be able to answer. I
Mhm.
guarantee you, I probably am feeling it in a different way.
Yeah, and you probably don't even know it. So that's where when we become really cognizant of our behaviors and our actions and what we're so much of what we do, we don't even realize we're doing. And we're patting ourselves on the back for doing something to better our lives, but then not realizing that we're actually replacing it with something that's actually still not helping us.
Mhm.
So I challenge you as somebody who's a doer and a yes person to sit with the idea or sit with even just a little bit of time during the day of doing nothing. It
I
doesn't have
love
to even be filled with meditation. It doesn't even have to be filled with journaling. Just
Mm.
doing something that you maybe previously didn't think was valuable or didn't feel like it was productive. Because how much of the time during the day do you feel like you need to be productive?
99.9% of the day.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that very
Mm.
much. And thank you. Cause it's funny. I recognize and know that that's what I need, but it's like I almost need someone else to say it, really, because it's in me. Obviously, you're
Mhm.
just showing me what's in
It's
me,
so
but
ingrained
hearing
in you. It's been
it.
ingrained in you since you were a little kid. This is you have to be productive.
Yeah.
And especially people like within our age range, this is oftentimes how we function. We are not comfortable with just doing nothing. We are not comfortable with just doing something for ourselves that isn't maybe in what we oftentimes consider being productive. Like we talked about last time, just engaging in good old fashioned self care. Like we don't do that enough because
No.
we don't think we're being productive when we engage in self care. And then a lot of times, people that have very toxic relationships with work, 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 no time to take care of me, no time to put the effort in to take care of me and my mental health and well being because that's not being productive. Especially now, ever since COVID hit, this is and I've talked to a lot of friends and colleagues. A lot of us were in office working every single day, and then COVID hit, and then we were immediately working from home. Okay, you're working from home. Life is really different. My work environment's really different. I'm by myself. I have maybe some extra free time because I'm not at the office and there's not a bunch of people around, or maybe I'm filling this time with something else now. And it has been a very different and drastic shift, especially I would say like for millennials, to go from being go, 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 go. I'm finding my value and worth in being productive to, oh my God, I'm home and I have like time during the day. Should I do something for myself? Should I even just like do something that isn't related to work? Like maybe I'll throw a load of laundry in.
Yeah.
My God, I did a horrible job today. I did laundry during work. I remember how much, like, especially like people that were, especially in this like the same age range, we would talk about it and we're like, oh my God, am I a bad employee?
Mhm.
Am I like, did I like, oh my God, no.
Yeah.
And then you realize, holy crap, it's actually okay to do things that are going to benefit your life, even if it's in the middle of the workday. Like you're not
Yeah.
Yeah.
gonna get fired.
Yeah,
No one's
you'll actually be more productive in a lot of
right.
ways.
Right. And you're being productive for work and you're being productive for you. And not everything has to be at the end of the workday anymore. So just a little bit of an example, especially I
Mhm.
find that like millennials especially are very much like this was just ingrained since we were kids of just
Mhm.
Yes.
you have to be go, go, go. You have to be productive. If not, you're lazy.
Yep.
Yep.
And we don't want to be lazy. So let's just keep doing and doing and doing. And oh my God, I'm anxious because I was lazy today and I feel like I didn't do anything productive. I didn't do anything for it's a vicious, vicious, vicious
Mhm.
cycle.
I'm
Um,
laughing because it's true. I
oh,
think
it's so true.
every time I'm like, I don't have anything to do. I'm gonna sit here, I guess.
Yes, let's just sit there. Just sit there. Pick up a book. Put the TV on. Like, go watch Billions. Like, go
Yes.
do whatever. Like, go do whatever the hell you want. It doesn't have to be something that's getting something done. Because guess what? When you're actually reading or watching Billions or doing nothing or just sitting and staring at the damn wall, you're still being productive because you're refilling your tank.
Yes,
Because all we
absolutely.
Mhm.
do is deplete our tanks, but we're not doing anything to refill it. So we're running on fumes.
Yep.
Absolutely. I could
And
not
we're
agree more.
and then we're cranky, and then that carries over into our relationships, and then it's just a never-ending cycle.
Yes.
But
Yes. Yeah.
you know, God, I mean, we could talk about the productivity and laziness and being doers and yes people. I mean, that could be like a conversation forever and ever and ever. And I'm sure a lot of people listening relate to it, and they're like, "Oh my God, like when's the last time I actually did something for me?"
It's a great
Yeah.
question to ask. Yes.
Like literally, I want people to think, sit back and think, when's the last time I actually did something for me? Was it not something that had to get done?
Mhm.
Not something that would be for the betterment of your household, not cleaning, not laundry, not, when was the last time you did something that refilled your tank?
Mm. I'm honestly thinking I think of an instance where it's like Dan and I went to get coffee maybe 3 weeks ago,
Yeah.
and that was
Three
probably the last
3
time.
weeks ago.
Yeah,
So that
literally.
look at your tank has just been, like,
Yeah.
emptying slowly.
Yes.
It's like
Yeah.
an oil leak, like, I have an oil leak in my car right now, I had to go run to the shop today. That's not for the betterment of me, that's not self-care, but that's a good example of, like, you have a slow oil leak. Drip, drip, drip.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
gotta fix it or it's gonna keep leaking.
Yeah.
100%.
But, I mean,
100%.
I can sit here too, I'm like, when the hell's the last time I did something for myself that
Mm.
filled up my tank?
Yeah.
No, like I've said to you guys before, I mean, therapists are like, we can preach, but we often don't practice what we preach.
Mhm.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
We're probably the people, the profession that is the worst at practicing,
Yeah.
you know? But that's just a little bit, it's a little, funny self-disclosure,
Yeah. No, I appreciate that.
but like you were talking about before, different, like the identity crisis piece.
Yeah.
I think we hold so much worth in different parts of ourself, right? And we when things shift within our lives, we almost feel like we're having an identity crisis. We don't know who the hell we are anymore. And it could be something small that shifts in your life. It can be a huge change that shifts in your life. It can be your entire life changed. You know, you get a new job, baby, a move, relationship ending. I mean, you name it. It could be something, or it could be something minuscule. There's so many things that we all hold value in different things. We do
Mhm.
not hold value in the same things. You were holding value in making other people happy,
Mhm.
made you feel good, but also made you feel like crap, made you feel worthy, right? People hold value in their jobs. People hold value in this, this, this. So when things change, we almost don't know who we are anymore and we feel lost. Absolutely lost. Now you brought up, yes, I became a mom. My daughter's going to be 11 months old this week,
Oh
which,
my
So
god.
fast.
yeah. And if you were, I mean, the fact that that's even, the words are coming out of my mouth still doesn't feel real because I still feel like I was pregnant and now here I am with almost a 1-year old.
Yeah.
And that's how quickly overnight your life can completely shift. And the identity crisis for new parents is real. And it's not something that's talked about enough. And that's one thing that I've done a lot of research on just when I became a mom is because I wasn't expecting this. I wasn't expecting the drastic change. You often think, oh, I'm meant to be a mom. I'm meant for this. Like, this is going to be great. And of course, it's beautiful and it's wonderful and it's fulfilling. But there's so many moms that I've talked to and just connected with that overnight you feel like you're just this completely different person. All the pieces of yourself that you had are completely shifted the moment that baby comes out.
Mm.
The moment you hold that baby in your arms for the first time, and it's what is life now?
Yeah.
And
For
I'm
sure.
not kidding you. The amount that is a question that if most, if not all new moms ask themselves, what is life now? Because the life that you knew is changed and very different. And it's not a negative thing, it's just a
Hmm.
different thing. But it can also feel like the heaviest, most drastic shift and change in the world because you go from living your life, maybe with a partner, having maybe your work, you have a job, you have this identity, and you have this drastic identity shift. And literally, it's from the moment you give birth and you're in
Yeah.
that hospital bed and you're like, now I have a person that I have to take care of. Because before you just have to take care of you, or if you're codependent, you feel like you're gonna take care of the other person.
Yeah.
You know?
1000%.
But now there's another life that is dependent on you. What the hell do I do now? How do I take care of me and take care of another person
Mm.
without neglecting me? And then that's where you find that a lot of new parents are completely neglecting themselves because their lives now revolve around nurturing this person, taking care of this person, feeding this person, clothing this person, changing this person all day long. Now, what about the old parts of you. Where are those old parts? Are they still part of you? Do you want them to still be part of you?
Mm.
And I think this is where it becomes interesting when we talk about the parts of like the self.
Mhm.
It's we often say old self or the old Meg, the old Elise,
Mhm.
the old Dan. Whereas, does it have to be the old? Can it just be the previous version? Does it have to be the old version? Sometimes we think of old and we think of, it can mean many different things. When we have this identity crisis, it can almost feel, we talked about change and how it's so uncomfortable to experience change and welcome change. And now you have this completely new version of yourself, and you have to learn to get to know this new version of yourself. And it's incredibly uncomfortable, and it's incredibly frightening and scary and terrifying because your whole identity has shifted and you don't even know who that new person is. And I think one thing, so many people in this world are parents, but there's not a single person that I talked to before I had gave birth to my daughter that ever explained to me the crazy identity crisis that you can experience by just the beautiful gift of your child being born.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And it's pretty wild. And then that, I mean, it's a roller coaster ride when you're having this identity crisis, because like I said, you have to meet this new version of yourself, and you have to welcome this new version of yourself, and you have to figure out what previous parts of yourself you want to incorporate into this new version of yourself. You don't
Yeah.
let everything go out the window. Your whole life is not over. Your whole life may shift and change, but that doesn't mean that you can't carry over pieces of your previous time to your new time. But it's the challenge of being able to incorporate those old pieces into the new pieces and then bringing them together to create something that feels comfortable and feels right. And even that's just an example of parenthood, and I hope, a lot of people listening can kind of resonate with that, especially if they realize like, holy crap, I didn't realize the identity crisis that I had. And I've talked to
Mhm.
moms and they're like, I didn't even know what I was experiencing. And then we often think, okay, is this clinical? Is this some type of postpartum depression or anxiety, which is incredibly common and is not talked about enough? Or is this actually just the fact that like your whole life changed overnight and you need to figure out what the heck this is going to look like for you now? And you need
Mm.
some extra support and some nurturing right now, and I think we oftentimes jump to, is this, especially in the mental health world, like, oh, is it postpartum depression? Not necessarily, not
Mm.
necessarily, but this is literally the fact that you had an identity crisis because your whole life changed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mean that you're experiencing something clinical, and but it's there's so many moms and so many dads out there too. I think we talk a lot about moms, we don't talk a lot enough about dads, but the hormone shifts that your body goes through, especially from pregnancy to then giving birth to then, especially if you're breastfeeding, like all of the different hormones that are racing through your body, like you almost feel like you're not even living your own life because
Sure.
hormones are not at the same level that they were previously. So
Mm.
how the hell are you supposed to know how you're supposed to feel?
Yeah.
Because your hormones are going all over the place.
Mhm.
The crazy drastic hormone shifts that you go through in the pregnancy and postpartum periods. So, I hope that any new parents or any just parents in general, maybe you have kids that are much older or listening, can resonate with a little bit of that, because we we talk so much about how hard it is becoming a parent, but we don't talk about how incredibly challenging it is to find yourself in parenthood.
Mm. Yeah.
Being Finding the version of you that you want to be,
For
And
sure.
it may take a really long time to get there. And there may be some people that have children that are much older, and you're like, I still feel like I never got back to feeling an identity that I felt was mine.
Mm.
But then
Yeah.
it's too late to find that identity. And that's where, it's a wild journey, parenthood. And that's just that, I mean, that's just an example. But like even with you, at least, like become like shifting from, being a previous yes person, or being a
Yeah. Yeah.
recovering yes person,
Yes.
that's just as much of a challenge. Like that is a piece of you. That is a part of you that you have had since you were a kid.
Mhm.
And now, okay, who am I now? Do I feel like I need to fill this part with something else? Do I feel
Mm.
like I need to replace this part that I'm relinquishing?
Mm.
I don't
Yeah.
know. That's up to you to discover. Maybe or maybe not. There may be so many other parts of you that you have been neglecting because of that piece of you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So I feel like you said that beautifully. Thank you for sharing and being vulnerable about motherhood,
Yeah.
because I obviously can't speak to that, not having children. Friends and family members do, but it's different. I'm simply just observing, not experiencing it. So thank you. I'm sure that that will resonate with a lot of people. And I really do just love and appreciate the language that you're using with the different parts of us. We're multifaceted, we're multidimensional beings. Yes, of course we're a whole, but there's fractals within this whole. There's, like you said, there's the mom or the parent in some of us, there's the people pleaser, there is the whatever title of my job, there's a sister, there's certain friends, there's the inner child, the inner teen, the angry person, the shadow, there's so many parts of us. It's really probably hard to identify, mostly with, I mean, I
Mhm.
can barely identify all the parts in myself. And that's what we're trying to really discover. That's what the podcast is all about. It's about self-discovery. But it is almost realizing that when something like this happens, an identity crisis, becoming a parent, I think, is a little bit different. And please correct me if I'm wrong, where you almost have a very big purpose in life when you become a parent. But for me, in relinquishing my people pleaser title, or even, I mentioned earlier, I worked corporate jobs
Right.
for a long time, and then I was in real estate. Like, I had to let go of those identifiers, the labels of being a salesperson, of a real estate agent. Like, those parts of me are gone. But I love what you said. Dan always uses this phrase, transcend and include. Like, I went through those phases of my life to get me where I am now. And where so many people, maybe they lose a job or they break up in a relationship and they lose this identity of how they are. It's almost like, instead of clinging to the old, how can you transcend and include that part of you that's going to take the lessons that you learned from that phase into the next part of this journey with you?
And that's the challenge.
Mhm.
And that's where we get stuck most of the time. Because, like we were been talking about this whole time, it's so much easier to sit and stay in the same toxic patterns versus putting the effort and making those changes to have a feeling fulfilled. And I feel like Dan could speak really well to this, because I feel like this is so much what I've learned from Dan. And I would love to like get more of your perspective on it, because I feel like we exactly like what you were saying, like you just brought up so many different parts of the person, so many, and I'm still like wrapping my head around all the different things, because I would like, again, like another exercise for people listening, how, like, I want people just to immediately say, how would you identify yourself?
Mm,
Typically what they would identify themselves with is what their career is.
Mhm. Yeah.
exactly.
And then how is that limiting you by just saying that that's like how you identify yourself? And like when I was talking about the motherhood thing, I was a person that I didn't put way too much of my identity into work, way too much, that I was neglecting my personal life, and I wasn't even acknowledging the other parts of me. So then I went from work, 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 bam, baby, and hi, who am I? Who am I? Who is this person? How do I live
Great.
this new person? How do I live this new identity? Because that other part is on hold, was on hold. You know, I didn't know what was going to happen with that. And then all of a sudden I'm like, hey, there's a baby in my arms and I'm not going to work right now. And I don't know who I am right now.
Yes, that's a
Why
great
isn't my phone,
example.
why isn't my phone ringing? Why aren't these people that I was talking to all day, every day calling me anymore? Like, what is going on? What world am I living? So, you know, I think I would love for people just to sit back and like do that exercise of like, in a word or two, how would you identify yourself?
Hmm. It's a great deep question. That's literally literally the epitome of our show. Like, yes, it's the depth of your core. Who are you? How do you identify yourself? Because also, like, are we really our gender even? It's a good question, right? Don't want to get into
Yeah,
that,
we
but
don't need to dive in, you know.
but it is good,
Yeah.
and it can change. You're constantly
Yeah.
changing,
But I
buddy.
feel like to take it maybe even a little deeper, like if it can change, then that's not who you are.
Mm.
So if it's a job title, if it's a relationship, if it's the way that you look, if it's your hair color or a haircut, if it's like it's your clothes, essentially. It's anything that can come off. Anything like that's not you. If it's not eternal, then that's not who you are. So I think that the more we can get in touch with the aspect of ourself that is always there, then I don't know, just the easier it is to be comfortable with change. Because
Right.
then it's like just like changing your haircut or changing your shirt. Like
Right.
this is just what I'm wearing today, but it's not who I am. This is whether I'm at work or you're home with the baby. Like it's not you're the same. You're
Right.
just trying on
What
different
kind of
things.
person are you? Who are you? Like how would people describe you? What are your personality traits? What's your characteristics? What
Hmm.
are the things that are meaningful to you? And we identify so much with exactly what you said, Dan, is the things that are ever evolving and changing.
Yeah.
Like my job changed, your job changed, people's jobs change, right? Like now I have a new part of me. I'm a mom and I'm always going to be a mom now.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that's pretty wild to think about too. And then I think, okay, now other parts of me, how would I describe myself? You know, what kind of person am I?
Mm.
That's who I am. It's not a job title. It's not, something that is just it's ever evolving and shifting. That's a piece of me. That is how I have grown. I've learned from it. That's made me into so and so type of person, but that's not who I am. And even like when we were talking about how we just identify with things, like when we in our last episode, we were talking about anxiety and how I was just giving an example of how people I self identify so much with, well, this is who I am now. And I'm
Yes.
gonna hold on to this, and this is me. And that's a choice you make.
Hmm.
That's a choice you make, right? There are certain things that, yeah, you will have that the rest of your life, or yeah, you have the ability to overcome that, or you have the ability to work through it. But oftentimes we hold so close. It's so common to hold and stick tightly to ways that you describe yourself, and that brings you comfort. But how is that benefiting you? Right? Like when I called myself last episode, I'm anxious Meg, like as an
Hmm.
example, like when we talk about
Yeah.
Instagram names and people then identify with specific things that maybe aren't necessarily would be as considered positive, but they hold on to that and identify with it. And I'm like, I like to always, within my practice, and this is something I've learned just within training and working, especially in trauma informed settings. I've always worked in settings that were, specialized in working with people that have experienced trauma. I always like to remain extremely curious.
Mm.
Everything that I do, and especially with work, I just remain curious. And I'm like, okay, you're labeling yourself like this. And I'm going to try and I'm going to kind of get a little bit curious as to why. What's the why behind that? What's bringing you that comfort by giving yourself that label? Um,
Yes. Yes.
just, It's
Yeah.
becoming, I think, just so much more common just to like hold tight and stick to things. Like, hi, I'm Elise and I'm a yes person. That's why I was joking about like your recovery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The whole point of like, yes, it is, especially if somebody that is identifying as an alcoholic. I'm an alcoholic. I'm not me, but like people, I'm an alcoholic. I will always be an alcoholic, even though I'm in recovery. So that is the thing too that I'm going to challenge you. Do you need to relinquish that whole part of yourself? Or is that actually a piece of your identity that you can use to your benefit, but maybe shift around a little bit more? You may can want to be a people that it's not always bad to be a people pleaser. It's not bad to be a yes person, but it's incredibly empowering to when you actually can say, be a no person too. It doesn't have
Yeah.
to always be all or nothing. And I think we oftentimes have this all or nothing thinking where can we meet in the middle here?
Mhm.
If we're going from something that we've identified with our entire life, okay, how can we make this healthier? It may not go away forever. And that's also okay. Because
Mm.
I also challenge you to think, how is this yes person identity? How is that? How has it benefited you? Because you may actually, if you dive deep, may find that there are pieces of it that have benefited you and have molded your personality to who you are, which is a
Mhm.
very kind, caring, and compassionate human.
Mm. Thank you for saying that. I appreciate I feel like that's such a beautiful way to kind of wrap up because it's really it's honoring, observing, and loving all of these parts of you. Because those parts and those pieces, like we had discussed, are established at such a young age, honestly, for survival, but they're getting you to points in your life and are probably knocking at your door from the repeating unconscious and subconscious patterns. And instead of completely dismissing, criticizing, judging them, it's really, this is certainly an exercise that I constantly have to remind myself to do. It's just observing them because what are these parts trying to teach me? And like you said, you do go through an identity crisis if you try to shut them off completely. It's really being gentle with yourself and allowing the good aspects of them to come with you. Like exactly like you said it so beautifully. Not every aspect of my people pleaser is bad or
Mhm.
wrong. Like I know that it has gotten me here to this point. It's now transmuting it in a much different way that I don't necessarily want validation or love from anybody else. I'm doing it out of the goodness of my heart. And that I know, regardless of what that other person is going to think, I love myself for doing it in this different way.
You're learning how to put yourself first and you're learning how to protect yourself.
Mm. Yes, yes, yes,
When
yes.
we learn how to protect ourselves and to actually take care of ourselves, that's when behavior change happens. If our behaviors are rooted in others and pleasing others or being manipulated by others, we talked a lot about manipulation too. Your behaviors and your actions are not actually benefiting you.
Yes.
Mhm.
And that's something to dig deep into. What part of you
Yeah.
feels that you're leaving it up to someone else to
Yeah.
dictate that?
Or what part of you, like Meg said, like what part of you is benefiting from that?
Yes.
Because a lot of times, like that's the only aspect of it that we need to give up is the part of us that's actually benefiting from the behavior that's hurting us in the big picture.
Right.
And then it can be just something that we interact with, but we don't identify as,
Yep.
and we're not attached to it anymore.
Yep.